Yeah.
The ordinance, y'all have it, y'all have the, zippers.
Okay, thank you.
And so that's got that. The development of the house now, I can scan it and put it back in the iPad.
Okay. I'll try that at the house.
But this.
Hey, sir. All right, how are you?
Good evening.
Hi.
Nice to see you. Cindy, glad to see you.
Good evening.
Okay.
Okay. What's your pipe?
What's that?
I said, did you make it? Okay.
Not ready to sign this tonight.
To me, I brought reinforcements.
Okay, well, okay, let me, Leroy's got his stuff up here.
You want me to sit up here, or am I gonna sit down there?
I guess right there, Leroy's got all his stuff.
I'm gonna sit over here out of the way. I'm just making sure that I get caught up to speed on everything.
Good evening.
Hi, how are you?
Good evening.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, Leroy.
Yeah, because you're not, you're still with council. Sometimes you may not want to vote. Yeah, but there's a, I know I want to vote anyway, but I'm looking at it.
You didn't get any of those. I don't know if you're after any. He's going to eat them all. Distribute.
I think I'm all right.
You got it. It's not, no.
Okay.
Nobody's paying for them right now, but they will eventually. Could be a conflict of interest.
I know. Sit there. Upstairs. Gotcha. All right. Thank you. I didn't come there.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
He doesn't finish it.
I just wanted to make sure that I didn't have to reiterate the questions that I sent to you. Yeah. Yeah, because I saw the pipes and everything. It was just she wanted the Huh?
You guys are busy.
Right, thanks for get some trouble.
That keeps getting bigger.
Oh, really?
Truck on and out. Yeah, that's all we can do.
Before we start the meeting, there might be some confusion about the sign-in sheet. Tonight, there's 2 places in the agenda where citizens will speak. The first one is the normal citizens' comments at the beginning of the meeting. You don't have to sign up for that. The sheet back here is if you wish to speak when we get to agenda item, whatever it is, number 12, because there's a place in item 12 for citizens to speak. The reason we're asking you to sign up and indicate whether you're going to speak for or against it is so we can try to have a balanced number of speakers on each side of the argument. We're just going to alternate between for and against. So that's why there's 2 different things. Okay, City of Castroville City Council regularly called council meeting scheduled for 6 p.m. on September the 24th is called to order at 6 p.m. The first item of business is roll call. You have to wait, please.
So I can't speak right now?
No. First item of business is roll call. Let the record reflect that the mayor is absent tonight. All the city council members are present, and myself as the mayor pro tem will be the presiding officer sitting in for the mayor. The next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody will please stand and remain standing after the pledge for invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. I'd like to introduce Pastor Matt Gutierrez from the Westover Hills Church. Give us our invocation.
Would you bow your heads as we pray? Lord Father, we look to you today. We're thankful for this incredible day that you've provided. We're also thankful that you've granted us the ability to join together and serve others in this community. Today we lift up this meeting in the city of Castroville. May your hand guide and direct every conversation that will happen in this meeting. In scriptures, we understand that it's important for us to pray and obey those that you've placed to govern over us. And so today, Lord, we pray for our city officials, for our mayor. Bring wisdom to this meeting, creativity and problem solving, a felt need for this community, and confidence in making the right decisions. I pray for the agenda, that you would allow every conversation to stay on topic to make the best of this council's time and efforts. Guide and direct it, Lord. It's in Jesus we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to the consent agenda, I'd like to make an addition to the roll call. I failed to introduce, we have most of the city staff here tonight, and we have Mr. Habib Khan and Ms. Cynthia Trevino from our city attorney's office present with us, as well as many of the members of the city staff. Item number 4 on the agenda is the consent agenda.
5.
Item 5, excuse me. We have quite a large number of special meetings and regular meeting sets of minutes. So first, we need to open to the city council for anyone who has any additions or corrections to any of these sets of minutes. Start with you, Sheen.
No, sir.
I found none. Thank you, sir.
No, sir.
There being no corrections to any of the minutes, does anyone like to make a motion to accept?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Thank you all.
Consent agenda is approved. We move on to item number 6, citizens' comments. You're welcome to speak at this time. We'll just go in no particular order. Please announce your name and your address and try to limit your comments to approximately 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. My name is this on? Okay.
Should be.
Okay. My name is Bruce Alexander. I live at 516 Vienna Street here in Castroville. And I have 2 issues of concern I want to address. One is the city needs some help. The main part of the city needs some help, in my opinion, in maintaining water pressure. I can tell you because I started now documenting it with the pressure gauge, and I can share pictures with you. I've talked with your engineer, I've talked with others. During the non-peak times, my water pressure is 75. 8 o'clock the other night, it's at 30. It's fluctuating between 25 and 30. And I'm telling you, TCEQ rules require you to have a 35 operating pressure. So your demand on your system, since you took well number 1 out of service, exceeds your capacity, your pumping capacity during peak times. You're fixing to talk about infrastructure improvements on the east side of town. Well, what are you doing for the rest of the city? Okay? So that's one. The second one, I want to read an issue to you. I brought this up only because
when I asked at the beginning if I could speak on an agenda item. I don't know how many of y'all understand what House Bill 2840 is. It went into effect on the 1st of September. But it says in part that a government body shall allow each member of the public who desires to address the body regarding an item on an agenda for an open meeting of the body to address the body regarding the item at the meeting before or during the body's consideration of the item. That went into effect September 1. That's not the citizens' comments. That's to allow a person to discuss items on the agenda specifically before you deliberate or take action on those. That's why I asked to make those comments. So I would encourage you to modify your policies and procedures so you also have the right to establish reasonable time limits and policies and procedures on that. But it is my intent to speak on every agenda item tonight under HB 2840. Okay? And I would refer to your attorney if you, obviously you're going to ask him about that, but I'm going to request to be able to be heard on every single agenda item. Thank you.
Your Honor, that was his opportunity to speak on every single.
You need to understand
We are
that.
in compliance with it.
And we've gone to great lengths. We understand your comments about the bill, and we've tried to incorporate it into the plan.
Thank you. My name is David Simonson. I live at 108 Tumbleweed Drive. I am the pastor of Castroville Community Church. It's a brand new church. We're currently meeting in my home on Tumbleweed Drive. And as per my conversations with Brianna Soto, it's my understanding that because we're very new, very small, and that our ultimate goal is to be temporarily in my home, that it would be okay to meet there until we could gather enough resources and people to meet somewhere else. So I'm here to answer any questions that the council may have, and also to assure you that I have every intention to comply with anything y'all might require. So, do y'all have any questions of me at this time?
We're not going to engage in questions
Okay.
at this time. I appreciate your offer.
Sure.
And I can tell you that your item is on the agenda for
Yes,
future
sir.
discussion tonight.
Yes, sir.
We'll discuss it at that time.
Okay, do you need me to stay around for that?
No, because that is, you don't have to stay, you're welcome to stay, but that's scheduled to be discussed in item number 14. It's an executive session, and it's sub-item C. So it'll be the third item we discussed, but that'll be an executive session.
Okay.
We may come back after executive session, and we may want to say something about it.
Okay.
It's up to you whether you stay or not.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I wanted to take a moment of your time.
State your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Maureen Guerin, and I live at 10006 County Road 5735 in Medina River West in Castroville. I wanted to take a moment of your time to tell you how very important the Castroville Public Library is to me. To do that, I want to tell you just a bit about myself. I arrived in this charming town about a dozen years ago. I had married a military man who was a Texan, and we traveled all over the globe. At the end of his career, we picked here to live, and I was smitten. He retired in 2011, and sadly, after 24 years of marriage, we parted ways and divorced in 2016. I couldn't leave this wonderful town. I found a place to live on my own and continue at the best job I've ever had, working for Medina Valley ISD. It's a humble salary, but an amazing job that I've been doing for 11 years now, and on that humble salary, Castroville Public Library has been there for me at every turn. When I needed a notary, Castroville Public Library was there. I've gotten countless books and audiobooks for entertainment, education, and enlightenment there. I didn't get our shared computer in the divorce, and I can't afford home internet just yet anyway, so when I needed to do my change of address for my driver's license, I did it on a computer at the library. Back then, I would have had to miss work and go to Hondo to do that if I didn't do it online. Think of all you do on your tablet or computer at home and know that there are others like me who only get to do it at the library. Every movie I've watched at my home in the past 3 years, I borrowed for free from the library. I can't justify the luxury of renting movies, but the library has many interesting and current titles free for me to borrow, and boy do I. I've stopped by for their social functions like lotteria, scavenger hunts, and open houses. I see my students there nearly every time I go. I hear them share with me the amazing programs they've participated in after school and over the summer. Each year when school ends for the summer, I know the library here will keep those embers of knowledge burning until we get them back in the fall. I'm really just compelled to let you know that I, a voting resident of Castroville, a dedicated volunteer active in my town, and an employee of your public schools, needs this wonderful library. It gives quality to my life, it enables me to accomplish things I might not be able to do otherwise, and I actively see it enriching the lives of the children in this community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Priscilla?
Good evening, Priscilla Garrett, 702 Florence. I'd like to give you a brief wrap-up on our celebration of the 175th that happened last Saturday. But first, a big thank you to my committee members, Councilman Herb Dyer, Lori Reeves from Medina Valley School, David Grabitsky from Landmark Inn, Helene Boehm from the Alsatian Pioneer Chapter of the DRT, Mary King, CCHA Living History Center, Crystal Molina, Chamber of Commerce, Pastor Knippa, Zion Lutheran Church, Arnie DeLuss, Economic Development, and of course Deborah Howe. And at the bottom of this list, although they weren't on my committee, I would like to extend our thanks to the News Bulletin because they did give us a lot of publicity before the event, and that was one of the reasons we think it was so successful. My committee members gave of their time to meet weekly for the planning and coordination for a successful event. And we can't forget all the volunteers who supported those committee members at each of their sites. It truly was a come-together community event. You gave us $5,000 to spend. We spent $2,888 of your money, so we're giving you back $2,112. Thanks for supporting our efforts in this way. A couple of things that we purchased with that money, like the banners over the street, we are trying to figure out ways future events can reuse those banners instead of having to buy a banner for every event that happens. So we hope that's going to happen if we can figure that out. We are guessing that around 150 citizens and visitors with the opening ceremony, and between 800 and 1,000 citizens and visitors participated throughout the day, visited our sites, and enjoyed the festivities. We do have leftover prizes because we were a little more optimistic than it turned out. So we're going to continue to pass those sunglasses and bracelets out at future events this year, beginning with National Nights Out. So maybe by the end of the year, we will have given one to everybody who visited us. Going around the table at our wrap-up meeting yesterday, no one heard anything but positive comments, with awesome being the word used most often. And the chamber got nothing but big smiles when talking to our shop owners and vendors around the square for the sales that they did that day. So thanks again for your support. I think everybody can be very proud of how this event took place. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Priscilla.
Good evening. My name is Sean Matthews. I reside at 150 Nesting Tree on the Medina side of Redwood Ranch neighborhood off of Petranco. I also wanted to share about the Castroville Library and the impact it's had on my family. First, I want to say that one surefire way to get my attention as a parent is to treat my children with kindness and patience, and that definitely happens from the staff at the library. I appreciate how they make my kids feel when they visit. Most of my kids are avid readers. A couple others are coming around. I have 6 children ranging from 18 to 6, but whether they're looking for books, playing games on the computers, or picking out movies, they're not afraid to ask for help from the staff. And that's because they trust the staff to be kind to them, to help them, and that's a big deal to me. Regarding programs at the library, my 2 boys have had a blast at the Gamers Club, and it's a bad day when we can't make it for that. All my kids have loved attending the summer camps. We've done the cooking camp, the art camp, the Harry Potter camp, the robotics camp, and some of my kids have also volunteered as helpers. And that has really helped my older kids become more confident and outgoing, and I appreciate that. Volunteering as a library aide has also been important for my oldest. She recently moved to Washington State to go to school, and her time volunteering was an important part of her application. My teenagers have also been involved with the junior friends at the library, helping to plan the camps, and that's opened their eyes to really understand what it takes to do these camps and to make them successful. Successful camps don't happen by accident. It takes the junior friends getting involved and the library staff. So that's very important. My wife and I recently taught a class at the Thursday night Adulting 101 program. We taught a class for high school students called Foundations in Personal Finance. We appreciate the library providing the space, the equipment, and the materials for 8 high school students to learn financial skills that will hopefully keep them from ever going into debt and be able to live with financial stress, without financial stress in their adult lives. That's a big deal in this day and age. It's important for me to say that my family is not unique. These programs are available to everyone in this room, and mostly at very little or no cost. In closing, I want to encourage the City Council members to consider how we can continue to provide quality support to our community through the library, and to even expand what the library brings to Castroville. I read recently that it is very possible that Castroville can almost double in size within the next decade or so. If that is true, then the city needs to consider how the library can grow and be prepared for that type of growth. It won't be possible in the size of building the library currently occupies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Robert Lee, 1314 Gentiles Council. I want to tag on what Mr. Alexander said. I've been here a while, and about 2 weeks ago I had a reverse osmosis machine under my sink spring a leak. And I didn't notice that until my socks got wet while I was washing the dishes. And if you've ever had a water leak in your house when you're not around, it can get pretty catastrophic pretty quick. And so I called the company and they said, you must have a water pressure issue. And I was kind of scratching my head. I knew we had reasonable levels of water pressure other than River Bluff, and everybody knows that sometimes those can get stratospheric. And we tell those people you may want to put a pressure reducer on your house to keep from having issues with your plumbing. And anyway, the company told me, you got pressure issues, and that's why this thing fractured. And so they sent me a device to put in line with the replacement parts. And however, if y'all find out, like Mr. Alexander says, we definitely have a fluctuation issue, then it might be good to let the rest of the people in town know. Until that's resolved, you might consider getting a whole house reducer, because the bills can mount up really fast with water. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Mr. Beck.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the community. Terry Beck. I reside at 104 Harvest Moon. Based on newspaper articles, rumblings within the city, and based on the agenda tonight, it continues to appear that we have severe issues with the wastewater treatment plant and the east side lift station that we have spent millions of dollars on. And all I want to know is this: was the former city administrator bonded? Were the engineering firms bonded? And were the contracting firms bonded that were associated with this project? If not, why not? And if they were, it's not y'all's baby. This happened before y'all got on the council, but I would encourage you to look into if these issues we're having became because of bad decision-making, professional work, or downright neglect. And if these people were bonded and we had an opportunity to execute those bonds, I would rather we get the money that way than put this additional financial burden on the backs of the taxpayers and the people who live in this community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beck. Would anybody else like to speak? Okay, we will close citizens' comments at 6:20. And we'll move on to item number 7, discussion of the fiscal year 2020 budget. I'll ask Leroy Vidalis, Finance Director, to introduce that topic.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Dyer. So last week y'all received updated budget information from us, And I want to thank each and every one of y'all for submitting some questions about the budget. They were answered. They were very thoughtfully answered. I worked with city staff on Thursday and Friday, and we answered this question as best as we could. So thank you for that. There were some really good questions, and which prompted us to go back and update some numbers. So y'all did get the new numbers on Friday, I believe. Ms. Howe emailed those to y'all, and then of course what I passed out now was the packet in yellow. Those were the actual changes, and so on Thursday it is set for budget approval. So we're coming down to the very end of it. So I want to thank each and every one of y'all for that. So at this time, are there any questions about any updates or about any other questions that y'all may have?
Infrastructure for River Bluff.
Yes, ma'am.
We need to bump it.
Yes, ma'am.
Especially after the water that just went down on Sunday.
Sure.
I mean, it's getting ridiculous now.
Yes, ma'am.
And I can't back down anymore.
Right.
Power bumps every Sunday morning, water on that lift station that was just built 3 years ago. I went up there 3 times to check with Roy and his crew and everything. And come to find out, whoever built that lift station put huge rocks instead of sand in there. So that didn't help our situation any.
Right.
So just from that one hole, how much more of it's jacked up.
Sure.
And in River Bluff, they didn't put our pipes underneath the streets. They put them underneath on our sides, and our streets are all jacked up. We've got to bump River Bluff up.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not because who lives there or anything. I've been living with this now for 14 years. Some people in the neighborhood longer than that. So we need to reprioritize.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the feedback.
Mr. Carey?
I ran just a comparative set of numbers, and it looks to me like we are robbing our utility fund to pay for other things at this point, to the tune of about $250,000.
Those are so are you referring to the transfers or?
Just looking at the balance coming in and the balance coming out of this fiscal year, we're $2,494,000.
So within that, so what makes it that amount? I worked with John Gomez, our Public Works Director, last week, and there's some deferments that we've had that we haven't done for the past couple of years, and there's some things that we really need to get done this year, and so therefore we got to go back and put that back in the budget because,
okay, and I
for
assume
example, that wastewater, just as an example there.
Yeah. I was looking at, if I can get into specifics, on page 67, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to get in on the question and answer thing. I was out of town at another function all weekend. So I didn't get to look at these until Monday.
Sure.
So for instance, on page 67, our operation and maintenance budget for this year is 100% higher than last year?
Yes, sir. If you go to page 68, one of the biggest ones was, really it's a capital outlay that pretty much had that big increase.
Okay. And that's parts, materials, okay. On page 71, again, we were looking at our outside service engineer costs, up 300% over last year.
Yes, sir. So during our budget presentations, Mr. Elliott had mentioned about adding some more additional funds to outside contracted services, and that's what we did.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't misreading this.
No, that's correct, sir.
And then, okay, well, that answers that question as well. And again, operation and maintenance, again, up 100% under our water system. So I'm just seeing these costs, and we went into this saying, zero baseline on this. And
so one thing that we have to keep in mind is our current budget, as far as budget, as I mentioned before, our numbers were inflated so high, and so I made sure that I budgeted on the conservative side.
I did miss seeing the current year-to-date, but nothing really to compare these live numbers to, or compare live numbers to.
So when I do our fourth quarter investment report, you'll have that information.
After we get a vote on this.
Well, I know, and you actually have the adopted budget there in the middle column, and you can compare the two, but I see what you're saying, yes, sir.
Okay. There were a couple other things. I think I answered my own question on that one. we're at a, we're at a point where you can see around town, we've got infrastructure issues all over. And,
These are things that we're going to have to go back and really look and see what can we afford to, do we go out for bond, do we go out for loan? I mean, there's a lot of deferments that we put off for so long that now it's catching up to us.
and our outstanding debt service is pretty significant already, so.
Right.
Did the documents that I gave you help any?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, because I want those back.
Right,
I
no,
gave him.
right, I was going to get back to you. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
I gave him the approved and adopted budget from 15 and 16 that showed money that was earmarked for projects and what have you. That way we can look and say, oh, well, this is why this didn't get done. Well, the money got sent somewhere, and no trace of that money going anywhere else, so.
Same thing happened in 2017. There was, in the capital improvements budget, almost $11 million, and I believe it got dumped into the waste treatment rebuild unrecordedly. I don't know how it got there, because we borrowed money to do that, but $10 million disappeared.
These are things that were,
You weren't here.
I wasn't here, but
Yeah. I know.
I'm working with each and every one of y'all,
Yeah.
so, and with staff, so yes.
Okay, that's all I've got right now.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
There are some things I'm concerned about, certain things like the parks and the airport. I'm a little concerned that their budgets are, to me, a little bit shaky. I'm on the airport, well, I'm not on their board, I'm their liaison, and I'm pretty much as pro-airport as anybody in this town.
Sure.
However, I noticed on our budget, and I talked about at the time, was the fact that we were spending more money than we can really afford if we're going to try to do improvements at the airport. I mean, you've got so much income, and like we went from in the budget went from a part-time airport manager to full-time. You got so many hangars that can cover. There's going to come a time when something's going to be needed out there, and if this and probably and I've looked at the others, some of the others, they're just really close. And I know some people have thought, and I've looked, and I didn't see where it says we're been shuffling money to the airport, but that's going to have to happen, and I want to, if that's going to happen, it's definitely going to need to be a transparent issue.
Sure.
On the fact that I think in some of these areas we've overspent. I looked at the IT budget. I don't have the page from me, but it went up tremendously. I understand we need that stuff, but there's a lot of money being spent, and I'm just not seeing some of the revenue to cover it. Is every department going to be solvent this year?
That's the plan. We want to make sure that
I know that's the plan. I'm asking for pretty much a yes or no question.
I would need to go back and do the analysis of every department. As of right now, the overall big scheme of things, general fund should be in the black at the end of the year, which is a good thing. On the budget side, no, because again, like I said, budgets were so inflated that we're not going to meet budget, but as far as actual, yes, we are going to meet actual. And that's what we get audited on. The same thing with airport. For the past couple of years, there was a depreciation line item that made the airport budget seem so high on the expenditure side. Well, that's not in there this year. That's why you see that decrease in the airport budget. After talking to the auditor, she goes, why is it in there? You don't have to put it in there, but for the past several years, it's always been in there. Is this an accounting entry? So I took that out. So that's why you see that decrease on the airport side. I worked closely with David up until this past week on his budget.
And I'm not saying we don't need David's a tremendous asset out there.
Absolutely.
And as far as him being a full-time, yes, I think that's a very good idea. My problem there is not with David. My problem is with paying David and still having, and other items that we've had in there that is paying for those. That's my concern.
Sure.
Not the personnel. Like I said, I think David, I think we were very fortunate to have him come along.
I agree.
Yeah, and that's, I just want to make sure every entity, department, airport, parks, utility, everything is solvent.
Okay.
And I'm having trouble seeing that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Shear.
You know, I had some of the same concerns that the other council members had, but after visiting with Leroy today, I really genuinely appreciate all the departments rethinking their budgets and cutting where they could cut to get the numbers where they are now. I know there's been some number changes as we speak, and I'm comfortable with the budget as it is right now. I feel like we got a good thing. Leroy, I appreciate everything you've done to this point.
Thank you.
And all the department heads too. I really do. All the city staff, but there was some cuts made in all the departments, I know, because of what we initially started with, and hope we can live with that.
I think that goes across the room.
Yes, I appreciate that, thanks.
Okay, in District 5, I submitted a fairly long list of questions to Mr. Vidalis about the budget, and he has responded in writing and answered my questions to my satisfaction. I'd just like to make a couple of general comments. If you look at the turmoil that the city has experienced in the last 12 months, especially with turnover of key personnel, finance director being one of them, I think they've done a tremendous job in all the departments, because most of the people who did this budget are new people. And they had to go back and research and find out how their budget was put together. The mayor was very insistent and has been pushing the city staff to try to minimize the budget for this year, to try to fix some of the things that are really wrong with the base city, and not to let the budget grow unnecessarily large. I think they've done a good job, but it's very obvious to me, being on the council for just a year and a half, that there was a very poor transition of information from many parts of our previous staff, where we lost those 11 or 12 people, to the new staff. There was a lot of information lost in that transfer, and it's very, very important that the citizens understand. It isn't for a lack of trying that people like Mr. Vidalis have tried to find the answers, and believe me, we've peppered them with a lot of questions. Why did you do this last year and the year before? It's very hard to find answers if there's no documentation that provides that kind of information, and it's been hard. I, for one, speaking only for myself, I'm willing to cut the city staff a little slack this year and let them get themselves fully immersed in their job during this coming year. And I would expect next year that we will do a much more thorough and detailed job of trying to make the budget better. But I agree with Mr. Shearhart. I think this budget is a good budget. We're going to be voting on Thursday night at a special meeting to finish the budget for the year and approve it. But I think they've done a good job, and I'm satisfied with the answers that I got. Any other discussion from the council?
I want to add something too. Thursday, I'm going to be absent because I'm going to be out of town, and I'm going to go on record and fully support the budget as it stands, even though I'm not going to be present to do any voting on Thursday.
Thank you very much. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Vidal?
No, sir. Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 8, briefing on recommendations from the Airport Advisory Board on a long-term airport plan. This briefing will be presented by Mr. Mike Arnold, the Airport Advisory Board Chairman. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
thank you to the council for the opportunity to speak to you here tonight. I had the opportunity to meet with most of you here when we took a tour of the damages that the airport sustained recently, and got a chance to talk a little bit about what is going on at the airport from the Airport Advisory Board. Tonight I'll be really brief. We've been working on a document which you should have had copies of. We called it the Airport Development and Management Plan, and I'm going to touch on a few key things in there, but there's one in particular that I want to spend the majority of the time on. First off, just to reintroduce myself, I'm Mike Arnold, the chairman of the Airport Advisory Board at this time, and I'm an avid flyer. I've been flying for 25 years and owned aircraft for 24 years, and I served 4 years on the New Braunfels Airport Advisory Board before coming here, and I'll be almost 4 years now with the advisory board here in Castroville. So I would like to tag in with what you were just saying about Mr. Dyer in terms of the turnover. With the normal turnover of city council, with the turnover that we've had in the airport manager's role just in the brief time that I've been involved at the airport, the Airport Advisory Board serves the purpose of having that resident knowledge being transferred, at least so that we have a little bit of continuity at the airport in terms of what we're focused on and what we're trying to achieve. So I see that as one of the functions of the board as well. It's not documented in this document, but it's something I just wanted to bring out. This document, as you look at this, you know, it has it goes through several different things. Its purpose is has a multiple purpose. Let's put it that way. We talked about breaking it apart. We ended up leaving it together, but there's portions that will be broken apart with a much more larger effort in the future. First and foremost, though, this is just outlining the vision and mission of the airport in the airport's view, and advising the city council that we need to make sure that we have a very firm and well-documented and well-planned vision for this airport. With the growth of San Antonio in particular and the area in general and Castroville, the airport is getting a lot more interest from people who want to move operations there, build hangars, etc. And it's really critical that we have this foundation of mission, vision, plan, and then I'm going to talk about the development growth as well. This document also talks about the governance of the airport board, the role of the advisory board, and then a description and history of the airport. Now, the history document, I think, is really good for new council people and new board members so that they have that continuity of knowledge of what has happened and why it happened, and if mistakes have happened, so that they don't happen again. So I think that's really important, and the board's intent is to continue to update that as new things come along, so that it becomes really a historical document for anyone in the future to know what was decided and why. So we'll be working on that. But I want to focus the rest of my minutes here just really around the portions here that deal with the growth and development plan. And so, as I said, we're getting a lot of interest at the airport. That I'm really thankful, as you guys are, that David is there. He's very well versed in aviation rules and regulations, and he spent a great deal of his time in getting himself further understanding of TxDOT and FAA. So I'm going to invite him up here to the podium in just a moment to talk about this. But if you go to that section on the growth and development plan, the key thing that is in there is the airport layout plan. And so this is a document that TxDOT and FAA is a mandatory document for every airport. This airport is considered an important airport for the state. Its classification is such that the state sees it as importance today and in the future. The airport layout plan there's up to 19, I think it is, different pages of that plan, some of which deals with the airspace around the airport and the physical layout of the airport itself. So I'll give you a quick synopsis on why this is important. The airport as it stands today, and all of you had a chance to tour the airport when we were touring for the damage that was out there. That is what we have to deal with now. But as you get going in the future, if we don't plan appropriately and buildings are put in places that are not advantageous for the future, we can find ourselves landlocked and not efficiently use the space, the finite space that we have out there, making it possible for us to spend a whole lot of money on infrastructure, more taxiways and things than we should have to. So it's really important that we have a detailed plan of what that should look like going forward in the future. And I guess my point to the council here is that the time is really now for us to make sure that we have these plans in place, and it needs to get updated. And David will speak to this in just a moment because of this growth. If people do come out and want to build hangars, and if they want to open businesses, we have to have the plan so that we know exactly where those businesses and facilities will go. So once again, that we have a well thought out plan that doesn't impact us in the future.
David, are you?
Before you
Yes, sir.
sit down, would you like us to ask you questions
Please.
while you're talking, or wait till you're done?
You can do it either way. Right now is a good time for me as we transition.
I have one I'd like to ask you.
Yes, sir.
The airport layout plan, as you mentioned, about 19 different parts to it.
Yes, sir.
Each part is comprehensive. Do you have a listing somewhere that shows the dates that each one of these 19 items was last updated officially for our airport, so that the council can become more familiar with where should we be focusing? Because we can't do 19 of them at once.
Yes.
I mean, none of us can. But we have a lot of things that are going to happen in our town in the near future, and we need to make sure we protect our airport.
Correct.
So if you, in the future, you don't have to deal with it at this moment, but
Sure.
we would like to get some information about how old is each of the inputs that you have with the FAA, and how do we how should you advise us to prioritize which ones we're going to work on in what sequence? Because we may have to get some additional expertise to help us with
That's
some
the
of
key.
these things.
That is the key, because no one on the airport advisory board is an engineer, and so we want to make sure that we have the right people and the right processes. And David has done a good amount of research, so I defer to him. But the answer, we'll get you the answer on the dates. You have one document that Ms. Howe passed out to you, and that's dated 16, and that's just kind of a synopsis of where we are today and some growth in the future. So the smaller one's is easier to see. The printout on the larger one didn't come through as well, but if you combine the two, hopefully you can see that one piece of the puzzle. And I'll let David speak here for a moment.
You bet. Anybody else have any questions for Mike before he sits down?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
I'll piggyback on what he had, and it also touches on the budget. You'll notice on one of my items, I got $15,000 for capital outlay. That's 90-10 offset with the NPE funds, non-primary entitlement funds that we get from the state each year. That 15 grand is 10% of 150 grand that KSA and TxDOT want to put in to our airport for development. So it would be to update the airport layout plan, as you said, meet with an engineer, meet with a business development plan, culminating to decide what the best use of our property is, where the best use to put hangars are going to be, ingress and egress, and the best way to solicit ourselves to get new business coming. Every day I get calls on new businesses coming. I've got people that want to build new T hangars, new commercial hangars. They want to do business with us, and we're working on that right now. Mr. Habib's got a lot of our lease agreements. We're setting up standards, we're getting minimum standards, and we're going forth. But you'll see my capital outlay items, they work on our infrastructure up front. There's 45 grand in the runway repair maintenance. That's for $450,000 of state money, 90-10 backing to get our runways into shape for the next 10 years. The 15 grand sets aside 150 grand for a new airport layout plan, updated. It'd be an official document with TxDOT. It'll be an airport business plan. So we need to develop, myself and council and the airport board, where we see the future of the airport going. It allows us to develop our airport plan, our business plan, and move forward every day to meet those goals. So if we want to build a new hangar in 5 years, we start at year 1, and we keep setting money aside for that 5th year project. We can set it down and say, this is how we did it, but we have to have a solid business plan in order to do that. And that's what Mr. Arnold is bringing forward with you today. With their help, with the Airport Advisory Board, and bringing you guys as much knowledge as we can, I do think we can get there, and we can get there fairly quick and keep up with the rapid rise in the economy that we're going to see in the near future. That's all I had for you.
Thank
Any
you for your
questions?
proactive planning, so.
Under your, under attachment D, you have a list of, for 2019, 2020, were you able to complete everything that was under 2019?
Yeah, let me pull that up here. I'm not sure we got everything there, but we got.
Page 18?
We were able to get the security fencing, the security cameras. I don't believe the refurbishment of hangars. This was the budget for this
Yep,
year.
this is what I did. So Mr. Fisher got the security fencing installed, the security cameras, refurbishing on hangars. We got some new sidewalls put in. We got some rubber stripping put in. We got one roof completely elastomeric coated. So we got another 15 years out of that roof on one that's 40 years old. So we did that there. We installed the AWAS weather system, that was the refurbishment to get it coming back up and get it put back online. Resurface and maintain existing areas. Mr. Fisher had some of our airport apron areas that were asphalt where water had started to get under and bubble, was torn out and replaced from TxDOT. They came out and did that. Provide additional landscape, or airport landscaping. I'm going to put that under the fact that you guys let us buy a brand new tractor, and they have been loving it. Mr. Vernon was having a ball out there today in the air conditioning, getting after it. So the ADSB, we have not been installed yet. I'm working with FlightAware. That'll be an addition to us. And then construction, additional restroom facilities in the rental hangar area. That has not happened this year. We do have a restroom out on the flight line for folks to use, and we got it maintained now, so it's being cleaned every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So,
may I ask a question on sewage in general at
Yes,
the
sir.
airport? Is any of the airport using the city sewer system, or is the airport all on septic?
All septic.
Is there any plan to move it to city sewer system?
I've been working with Mr. Gomez, and we're got to work those numbers. I've been doing the same thing with ComZoom to get us real internet out there. So it's a matter of when we're going to put the trench in, getting all the entities moving together to execute, but making sure that the lift stations can handle what rise we want to put up. So far, that's been my challenge, is getting new businesses to come in with zero infrastructure. We have one internet capability, AT&T dial-up. It's slow as molasses. We have all septic systems. And like Mr. Arnold brought up with the airport layout plan, if we put a building in spot X and we put in a septic system, well, now when spot Y comes in and goes to that spot, we got to move it. So we're paying double, triple, 4 times to do one thing, and we might be able to save that money and put one infrastructure piece in at one time at a larger cost to eliminate future problems.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you,
both
gentlemen.
for your presentation. Moving on to item number 9. Discussion and appropriate action on an ordinance providing for the extension of the Castroville city limits by the annexation of a tract of uninhabited land totaling 9.81 acres, more or less, adjacent to and contiguous to the Castroville city limits, granting all future inhabitants and said property all the rights and privileges of other citizens, and binding said future inhabitants by all the acts, ordinances, resolutions, and regulations of the city, establishing an effective date. I think for background, this we're talking about, it didn't say it directly in here, but this is a Security State Bank plot of land that's bounded on the north by Highway 90, on the south by 471. It's just to the east of the Circle K intersection. And we have had 2 public hearings where we have invited people to speak. I do not believe anybody spoke at either one of the 2 hearings. Now we are going to act, we have the ability to act tonight to make a motion and move on this annexation. But before we do, I want to open up to the City Council an opportunity to discuss or ask any lingering questions you may have that have come from the previous meeting. Start with you, Mr. Shearer.
I don't have any further questions. I think it's a good deal for the city.
Okay. Mr. Byers.
No, we've discussed this and had no concerns from the citizens, so I have no questions.
It's a great opportunity to add good neighbors, and I do believe we're actually contractually obligated to address it, so.
I was at the planning and zoning meeting when they presented everything, and everything's right on track for us.
Okay. And speaking for myself, I have no objections. I've read the documents. I think everything was done in accordance with the ordinance. And so is there anybody on the City Council who would like to entertain a motion?
I make a motion that we accept and approve the annexation of 9.81 acres of land fronting the south edge of US Highway 90 to the east of US Highway 471, Medina County, Texas, owned by Security State Bank.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. No nay. 5-0, the motion is passed. They will be annexed. Moving on to item number 10. Consider and take appropriate action on extending the term of a current professional services agreement with Freeze and Nichols until January 30th, 2020. I believe we passed this previously, and it had an expiration date of December 31st, if I was correct.
September.
October.
September.
Oh, September 30th, it was going to expire. This is now an action to move that expiration date further out in the future. And Brianna Soto, would you like to brief us?
Yes, and so on the agenda item, it says January 30th, but it's supposed to be January 1st of 2020. Yes, and so this is an existing contract with Freeze and Nichols. It's just so we can call them. They help us with their ordinance. They already gave us some recommendations to address modular homes in the city of Castroville. That hasn't come across y'all's desk yet. It will in the future. And then the next thing that they're working on right now is sign ordinance, because I don't know if y'all have read through the sign ordinance, but it's quite confusing. It's hard to read. And so this is just to extend that contract with them, just so we can utilize all the efforts that they put forth so far. And that's about it. Yeah.
This is a $25,000 contract, if I recall.
Yes, sir.
And we pay as we use it.
Yes.
Okay. Let's start with Sheena. You have any questions?
No, sir.
Paul?
No, let's move forward.
No. Let's move forward.
Can I say one thing? On their agreement amendment, it does say January 31st.
Oh, does it? Okay,
Yes,
it was
ma'am.
supposed to be January 1st. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No, I didn't catch that. It is supposed to be.
We got a few extra days.
Yeah.
We just need to clarify that we're going to extend it till January 1st, 2020.
Yeah, because it's supposed to be an extra 90 days, so it should be January 1st.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody like to make a motion?
I would move that we extend the current professional services agreement with Freeze and Nichols until January 1st of 2020.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? There being no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. No nays, 5-0. The motion passes. Thank you very much, Brianna.
Thank you, Brianna.
Item number 11. Update, consideration, and appropriate action on a resolution approving an agreement to use City of Castroville facility which will authorize the use of the municipal pool for swimming programs provided by JDN Sports. Just a little background, so we discussed this in the last council meeting. We were missing some information, so we tabled it, and we had hoped to receive the information so we could deal with this issue tonight. I can tell you we did receive the information that we requested from JDN about their 501c3 status, and our lawyers tell us that they're satisfied that that information is accurate and complete. The other two items that we had asked for at the last meeting that we did not have was a fee schedule and a operation schedule. When would the pool be open for what types of utilization? And we had hoped to have those tonight. I spoke with Mr. Schroeder at 5 p.m. tonight, and he didn't think they had been submitted to the city yet. And we have canvassed the staff, and we're unable to find them, so we don't believe we've actually received them yet.
Mr. Donner, I do have a comment on that. After speaking to Devin, our Parks and Operations Director, he did receive the actual schedule of operations, which I did send to the but there was some confusion on that schedule, so there are questions. But as far as the fee schedule itself, we have not received that, so right now it's incomplete. So.
Okay, so we're still in a situation where we haven't got all the documents. Habib, is there anything you'd like to say on it?
No, appreciate the certificate of Secretary of State, but we do need the fee schedule and I think there are some questions.
Okay. Any discussion from the council members?
I'd move that we table this till the next regular scheduled meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to table this to the next meeting, which, by the way, would be October the 8th. It would be the next regular meeting.
No, scheduled, I said regular schedule.
Yeah,
Yes.
but that's our law. We have to go to the next regularly scheduled meeting. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Being no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. I believe we have 5 ayes, no nay. Motion passes. Item number 12, presentation, discussion, and public comments on the proposed Alsatian Oaks Master Plan development located on 417.848 acres in the city's extraterrestrial limits east of the city corporate limits. There are 3 parts to this item. The first part will be a presentation by Mr. Clay Binford, the city's special counsel for the development. Mr. Binford.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. For the record, my name is Clay Binford with the law firm of Norton Rose Fulbright, representing the city as special counsel. As you know, we've talked about this for many times, particularly as it manifested in 2 public hearings, town halls, that we conducted in August and September, where we talked about initially the terms of the proposed development agreement, and also we followed that up with the financial impact of that development agreement to the city based on the assumptions that were utilized to formulate the transaction documents, and also to answer citizens' questions. We did take citizens' comments at the second town hall and responded to those that were asked. I've answered questions from multiple members of the City Council and staff, which have also been responsive to community input. I'm not going to go into the restatement of the things that we have already covered under the development agreement. I will go with a little bit of history and talk about how we got here. As you will recall, as I spoke at the town hall meeting, the city engaged me in response to an overture from a landowner outside of the city of Castroville to negotiate the terms by which that property owner might agree to voluntary annexation to come into the city. We took that opportunity to look at a myriad of issues, primarily being how could we utilize this property to solve some regional issues within the city of Castroville, and also impose some development standards and criteria that would otherwise not be imposable by general law. So we present to you tonight the results of those negotiations. The matter before you today is an ordinance which would do several things. First and foremost, it would authorize the execution of the development agreement if you were to choose to do so. Subsequent to that, we would have the establishment of certain accounts and funds to deposit the money from the development as it comes in, so that it's segregated from the other city revenue until it's used for its ultimate purpose, as specified in the development agreement. Then we would also approve what's called a 380 plan. This is an economic development plan under Chapter 380 of the Local Government Code, which is general in nature but specifically drafted for this development, which is the requirement for the cost share back to the developer for its public infrastructure and other public benefits in order to be compliant with applicable Texas law. So this ordinance accomplishes all 3 of those things. I'm happy, I'm really here today not to reiterate what we've done before, but to be here as a resource to answer questions. I do think that there have been questions that have come to my attention, primarily today from your city manager, regarding why we did not utilize a PID. A PID is a public improvement district, which is a development tool. And I wrote a response to Mr. Vidalis, and I told him that I would be happy to read it tonight if anybody's interested in knowing why we did not go down that path. Within my purview, my firm and myself, we have multiple developments and experience with public improvement districts. And as any other tool, it's good for some purposes, but not for others. If you have an interest in understanding the analysis that we utilize for this, I'm happy to relay to you, which would essentially be me reading the email that I gave to Mr. Vidalis that I'm sure he'd make available to anybody that wanted to see it. So if you'd like to know,
I'd like to have that information, yes, sir.
Sure, and I'm just going to read through this. A PID is a management district that allows a political subdivision to identify and segregate a piece of property that will be subject to its terms. The political subdivision is allowed to impose an assessment on the property within the designated area. While the assessment is viewed and treated similarly to a tax, it is not a tax. It is an additional charge that is imposed upon the property owner within the subdivision to pay a pro rata share of the costs of public improvements that directly benefit that property owner, and whose pro rata share is commensurate to the cost of the project relative to its enjoyment of that project, meaning you cannot over-assess somebody for a disproportionate amount of a public improvement. Assessments cannot be levied for public improvements that do not directly benefit the property owners that are paying the assessment. So if the developer is providing public improvements that benefit city residents other than the assessed property owners, the total assessment can only be the portion of the cost of the public improvement that is allocated to those assessed property owners. So you look at this, we were looking to solve regional issues, meaning that we're bringing benefit of this to other residents in other areas of the city. We would not be able to impose an assessment to recoup the costs of the portion of the public improvements that go beyond the neighborhood, and that's not what we wanted. Assessments are less secure than taxes. They are second in lien position, and you have to take certain steps in order to defeat a Texas homestead exemption. So the typical cost of financing is higher when assessments are the source of the repayment of the security, so our dollars don't go as far. Assessments are an additional charge to the property owners and are accretive to city taxes, meaning that the people within this development would pay city taxes plus an assessment. This is why PIDs are more commonly used in unincorporated areas. They mimic the cost of a nearby city tax in exchange for city-like services. If the assessment is in addition to city taxes, then the overall quality of the construction would likely be drastically reduced to offset this increased cost to the homeowner. So do you allocate your dollars to higher quality development or to an assessment to recoup the cost of the public improvements? We elected for higher quality construction. PIDs do not allow participation for cost share by other political subdivisions. So we're talking about going to the other political subdivisions to seek their participation by participation in the tax increment reinvestment zone. PIDs don't allow you to do that. We also think it would significantly weaken the city's position if you were to ask other political subdivisions to sacrifice a portion of their taxes when the city was not doing that itself. PID assessment management places an additional burden on city staff as well as the Medina County Appraisal District. You have to aggregate an assessment roll, and even though you can pay it in installments, you have to readdress it every year. Under the proposed development agreement, the city receives from the developer extensive public improvements that benefit the city as a whole, and not just the development itself. By not requiring the developer to pose an assessment to recoup the cost of its public improvements, this would frustrate the development's success, given the limitations imposed by the city to promote a quality development. So you would have our development standards plus an assessment would put them in a disadvantageous position relative to competitors and relative to the market. If the reimbursement was limited to assessment of just the property owners that directly benefit from the public improvement, then the reason for entertaining this proposal that this development provides a venue for solving regional infrastructure issues was eliminated. And so that was our analysis as we went through this. When we go through and we start looking at our basket of tools that are available to incentivize development and development that you like, we look at the different attributes of what you're trying to accomplish. And then based on that, we find the right vehicle that most closely aligns to what you want to do with what the developments or the facts and circumstances are relative to a particular project. And so that's why we eliminated the public improvement district, and we elected for the process that we took, which is the voluntary annexation of bringing the property into the city. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Obviously, we've been through this a lot. You have had plenty of opportunity to do this. I know that there are other presentations that are outside of the legal and talk more about what's actually coming out of the ground, which I know many people are concerned and interested in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Binford.
Thank you.
If you maybe just stay there for a moment,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Happy
We're going to move to Part B of this item, number 12, which is discussion by City Council. So I'll start with you, Mr. Shearhart. An opportunity for you to ask any questions that you have, and we can give Mr. Binford, our city, to try to address it.
No questions at this time.
Thank you,
Clay.
Jesse?
I haven't got questions, I've just got concerns. I've been approached by a good number of people in the community concerned with the more or less $30 million that we're basically paying our developer to come to town. I've been mayor of town of the actually 2 towns. I've been in and around city business for probably longer than everyone on this council besides myself combined, and I have never seen an agreement like this where the city paid to have a developer come in. I understand that man wants to make money. Everybody does, but we've got a whole lot of issues in this town that $30 million would fix, and I have a lot of trouble supporting it with $30 million going out to a brand new project. And also I had some issues with some of your statements at the town meeting about how how costs would not increase. If we double our, or even 50% increase our population, yes, we're going to have, you said library wouldn't be impacted. Yes, it will. We're going to we'll probably have to have a brand new library just to support them. City staff wouldn't be. Yes, it will. We're going to, the city manager, whoever that might be, we don't have an assistant. He will need an assistant when we're that big. There's a lot of costs that you said wouldn't happen that will. I've just been, it's not going to go that way.
No, and I appreciate that. And again, I'm not here to advocate for this. As I told you at the first town hall, this is your agreement. I'm here to present to you what I think are the facts. I will tell you that I'm not sure as anybody else as to what's going to happen in the future. I can show you that we anticipated and we increased costs that we anticipate coming to the city that we know are going to come, and we think on a pretty conservative basis. And even after doing that, we had $16 million of general fund dollars that were going to be left over that would be available to take care of the things that you described, because I'm sure that's correct. Not only are you going to have increased costs that we didn't anticipate, you're likely to have decreased costs that maybe we overestimated for as well. But with that, you have the $16 million that is going to be it's going to at least provide a buffer for the city.
How long is that $16 million placed over? 30 years?
Correct. It's all over the 30-year period.
When I think I mentioned to you, I asked, how much we're getting. There's a picture there you showed of $28 million. That's less than $1 million a year. And to me and everybody else out here, $1 million is a pretty good chunk of change. But when you get even to a small town like Castroville, if you look at our budget, $1 million isn't that big of a drop in the bucket. And one hiccup, and that 900,000 plus is going to be eaten up pretty quickly. So I mean, we're not getting. I don't see that the town is getting much benefit from this development. I realize we're going to get a new development with new houses, going to have new businesses out there. The sales tax is going to be sales tax, ad valorem tax is going right back to the developer.
Well, regarding obviously the money's not linear. So as you increase in value and population, so does your revenue. So to say that it's $900,000, that's the average, correct?
That's what you said.
Well, I'm telling you, but that's the average. But you're going to increase over time. So in year 25, it's going to be a significantly larger amount than it is going to be in year 5. And that is just because of the value coming in over time, which would more closely align to your increase in expenses. Now, I do think that there is significant benefit in building this out at a particular level and right-sizing the infrastructure to the need in a master plan development. The things that I'm hearing about today, that I heard earlier today about the River Bluff issues, and you bring in infrastructure after the fact to service a community, is a much more expensive proposition than right-sizing the infrastructure and building it in concert with the development. And so you are going to increase. You can't really use the existing city as a proxy as to how this development is going to cost prospectively, because that's not how this city was built. The plan is to try and build something that fits infrastructure to need in a symbiotic way.
Thank you.
Mr. Carey.
As I reread this and imagine worst-case scenarios, one of those is economics. The presentation, the plan is set up on a kind of an even-keeled economy, and everything just keeps rocking along the way it is. Not necessarily going to be the case. We don't know. We don't have that crystal ball. There is a pinch point that I'm most concerned about with, and that is where the city gets obligated for a pretty major sum of money right up front. And, you know, just, it's basically attached to ad valorem taxes and sales taxes, and those aren't limited to the development itself or the funds that are generated by that development. It's going to be burdened on every citizen in Castroville.
That's not true.
Well,
the money's going to be segregated. That's part of the ordinance today. We segregate the money in an account. So the only source of payment is the actual taxes that are generated within the footprint of the development.
Okay, well, I'll have to reread it, because I read it a couple times, and, and it was pretty general when it referred to ad valorem taxes. It didn't state specifically where those taxes were coming from.
That's in the definition, and I'm happy to point it out to you. But that is absolutely the intent and the requirement of the document.
The pinch point comes when there's money spent to put this infrastructure in, a lot of infrastructure in, at phase one. And at that point, there's nothing coming back. I mean, there isn't a lot sold, there's no taxes being paid, there's no residents, there's no businesses yet. So that's just a...
Sure, but remember, the developer pays for all of that.
Yeah,
and if there's no tax revenue out of this footprint, there's no source of repayment to the developer.
But when he is declared done with that infrastructure development, that construction, then...
Subject to the availability of money.
Right.
Within that footprint. If the property doesn't develop, he doesn't get repaid.
Okay, all right.
There's absolutely no...
I'll have to reread it again.
Sure, but no. I want to be very clear on that.
Yeah.
There is nothing outside of this footprint, no city taxes, no city revenues that are obligated to repay the developer.
Okay. Well, I'll double check that. Thank
Sure.
you. Okay, that's all I have.
Gina?
I like the commercial side of it. Bringing business to Castroville is always a wonderful thing. I like that part. As far as the residential side, they've already talked about the financial side. I'm also looking at, because at a couple of the town hall meetings, we had people bring up, like one of the families that lives adjacent to where the development would be, they're already having flooding problems when we get rain. Now we're going to take away vegetation and everything. And in page 12, para 2, line 4 and 5, it says does not cause injury to adjacent property. So how are we going to make sure that if we get a good rain and they get flooded, that it's going to be taken care of properly and not some cheap way to take care of them? I have that concern, and people tell me, well, it's a 100-year floodplain. I've lived places that in a 100-year floodplain, it flooded every year for 5 years straight. So that doesn't mean anything to me. And then on page 18, it says system improvement. It mentions water and wastewater, but there's also gas and electric. I mean, that's going to fall on us too.
No, that's all the developer responsibility. So we're talking.
Getting to where the developer is, though.
Those are part of the infrastructure that he has to pay for to bring them to the property.
But all that's mentioned in the agreement, because I read it for 2 hours today, is water and wastewater.
That's the primary driver on that. Now, the electric it's not city electric. It's provided by CPS Energy. So
I understand, but CPS still works with our electric guys and putting in that stuff, and then the gas is our guys too. So either way, they're going to have to work with our people.
Right.
So I would like to have that added to it, if anything. And then, like I said, floodplain area and everything. We already have problems with roads flooding in Castroville. Who's going to make sure these are built, the roads and everything in the housing development is built properly and raised right, that way that we don't inherit an infrastructure that's going to flood. I mean, I don't want to inherit that. I don't want the citizens
Sure.
of Castroville to inherit that.
Mhm.
That's not fair to anybody. And then it said, during the town hall meeting, you said there would be no perimeter fence around the housing development area, but there's people that have property around the housing, where the housing development area is, are always concerns of, all right, who's going to make sure nobody's going to tear up my place when they're doing the construction or dumping their stuff. I've seen construction sites here in town to where people have come in and pushed stuff down into dry creek beds they weren't supposed to, or let their garbage flow all around, tear up other people's stuff. Who's going to make sure that happens? What is the guarantee in the agreement that if this happens, developer's going to reimburse the owner of that property to replace the damage that's done? That kind of stuff. We've got to look at these things too, because like I said, I've seen it. I've lived here 14 years now, and I've seen it many times. And that's not fair to our citizens that are already here. And like I said, they already talked about the financial side. The 70-30 split, it could be better. I mean, really, 30% our way. I mean, we could, 60-40 would still be better than 70-30. I mean, come on now, we got to have a win-win situation on both sides. But that's all I have.
My comments, I've been working now with this agreement for about 1.5 years, trying to understand it, and we've asked lots and lots of questions, and we've gotten very thorough answers. Citizens have asked a lot of questions to me that I couldn't answer, but I went and asked for the answers, and Mr. Binford and the staff have given them to me. Well, what I've found in my understanding of the agreement is that I think it's very thorough. I think it lays out in a realistic fashion what it's going to cost over time. I think it's very well built from the standpoint of it does not assume that everything is going to be rosy for 30 years. It assumes 4 good years, 4 poor years, 4 more good years, 4 more poor years. So it tries to take a realistic accounting of what it's going to cost and what it's going to make. I think that was done on purpose, and I think it should be comforting to us to see that it's not a rosy picture. It's a realistic picture. Then after we had an opportunity to explain the agreement in the town halls, we got a myriad of good questions. One of those that I think was particularly important, we gave a lot of information, but we never really sat down and showed a comparison of what it's going to cost to what it's going to make. We had those numbers, but they weren't juxtaposed. So the staff went back, they looked at it again, they laid it out in living unit equivalents. I think it's worth talking for just a moment, because that's how we did the analysis, not we, the council, but the city and the staff. We tried to come up with a realistic way of explaining what is it costing us today to run our city. We know that, that's facts. So we figured it out in living unit equivalents. So we could say, this is how much money we spend for police per living unit equivalent, which for those of you that aren't familiar with the term, it's a household. One house, probably 4 people. Or a business is based on the square footage of the business, but you calculate it back and you can come up with an equivalent number. And I believe in Alsatian Oaks it was 197 living unit equivalents, which is what the retail would equate to. So very carefully they looked at everything we're doing today and what it's costing us. And then they use those living unit equivalents, which are spaced out over time, not being all built at once, but spaced out over a planned schedule. And we can see when it's going to cost us more money for more police officers, for more public works staff, for more administration. It becomes very clear when you look at it in 5-year increments. And the risk is all slanted in favor of the city as opposed to being in favor of the developer. As Mr. Binford pointed out, if the developer is not successful and is unable to sell his property to buyers, there won't be any money for us to pay him with. He won't get paid. And it's very important. He said this 2 times already. He wrote an ordinance that he's recommending to us to adopt that's very comprehensive, that talks about all aspects of this agreement. And in there, it requires us, it doesn't make it optional, it requires the city to set up bank accounts for this money. And the money that comes from the people who live out there and the retailers that work out there goes into those funds, and only those funds. And that's the money that is going to be used to pay the developer. If there's nothing coming in, there's nothing going out. He's not saying that the rest of us that live in town now, that live somewhere else, are going to have to make that up, because we're not. If the money does not come into those funds, we don't pay the developer. So the incentive is on the developer to make this a successful development. And I'd like to just speak a moment about that, because I think there's lots of questions. Why are we paying him to do infrastructure? Everybody's made it clear it's not a normal, routine way of doing business. But what it is, it's a partnership. This organization has gone to great lengths. For over 1.5 years, we've been negotiating about our ordinances and the way we've lived for years in our town. And we started out this far apart. And over the past 1.5 years, we've negotiated everything. And we've moved in here closer to the middle. And we believe we're pretty close. Where, as I think you pointed out, Sheena, or maybe it was Paul, everybody's got to be a winner. The city can't be the only winner. The developer has to be a winner too, or there's no sense in doing this. So what do we get out of it? We know what we're going to have over there. We've seen the pictures, we've seen the detailed plans. We have a very clear understanding of what is going to be built over there. And it's good. And it tries very hard to meet our standards as a city, to try to fit in with our culture. They've gone to great lengths, over 50 iterations of different changes as we negotiated. And everybody's worked in good faith to get to the nearest point we can get. I personally believe we're there. I've read this agreement at least 12 times. I've been through it line by line with Mr. Binford. I understand it, and I can tell you as a representative of the city, I think it is a good agreement. I think it is solid, concrete, well thought out. The risk is distributed, but most of it's on the developer. You people who live in town, I can tell you, you don't have to worry that you're going to pay for this development. You're not. They're paying for themselves. We've got several stories during the town hall from our commissioner about other types of communities that have been built like this in the county and how successful they have been. Not all of them. There's some out there somewhere that weren't done well, but there's many that are done well. And I can guarantee you, this has been done well. This agreement is probably the most comprehensive agreement that has ever been written for this kind of a development. It's, in my opinion, is going to become a model agreement if it's accepted, and we choose to do it. We have a company here that's offering to partner with us, giving us a lot of guarantees, and I, for one, believe we're dealing with honorable people. I believe their heart's in the right place. I'm a businessman, but I believe these people are telling me the truth. And I'm willing to stand up and say, I will vote for this, because I think it's good for our city. I'm not from here. I've only lived here 20 years, really, in the city. But I've been married to someone who came from here for 52 years. I know a lot about Castroville, but I'm a wash-in, so I don't really have the credibility that many of you have. But I can tell you, as a business person, as a program manager who has spent my entire life managing programs that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, very similar to this one. This program is over $450 million program over the next 30 years. The last program I managed for Lockheed Martin was $455 million over a 10-year period. I know how to manage these programs, and I've studied this information thoroughly. Don't just take my word for it. Read the information, ask questions. We may or may not get to a point to vote tonight, but I want you to know the City Council is trying to make as transparent an activity as we can. But folks, we've been working on this a long, long time. The people who own this property have been working with us for over 10 years since they started. They can't wait forever for the city to make a decision. We need to study it. We need to learn about it. Obviously, we have a lot of questions that are still unanswered. We need to get them answered so that we can make a decision in a timely fashion. That's all I think I wanted to say. Any more discussion or questions for Mr. Binford? Okay, that brings us to an end of item B. Thank you, Mr. Binford.
Thank you.
Item C. This is an invitation to members of the public to provide testimony and comments. The total time allotted for this public comment is going to be 30 minutes. The reason I asked if you would sign for or against, I'd like to try to be fair and have alternate between people who want to speak for and people who want to speak against. The first person that signed up was Mr. Bruce Alexander, who wants to speak against it. Mr. Alexander, please try to limit your comments to about 3 to 4 minutes.
Sure. I just want to clarify, I'm both against it and for it, if that's possible. I'm good with the development, I'm just not good with the terms that y'all are talking about. Because I don't think personally, I don't think they're in the best interest of the city. They're slanted more towards the developer. Before I say anything else, I want to thank all of y'all for the service you do to the city. I appreciate it, okay? I may not agree with everything, but I haven't been, I've been gone 11 years, but I had to come for 20 years before this body on different things with the city, so I know what it's like to have to deal with that with the staff and what y'all are dealing with, so I appreciate your service to the community. My concerns come with the terms as far as the city. I'm going to make a comment. The city has a CCN. You have an obligation to provide water and sewer. You don't have an obligation to annex it. It's a great thing to annex. Okay? But they're two separate issues. On the water and wastewater, you're allowed by TCQ rules to recover all the cost of providing service, and you don't have to pay it back. That's a fact. Okay? So to reimburse a developer for the cost of the infrastructure within their subdivision is wrong. I manage a rural water utility, and we have subdivisions come all the time, and we hold the developer to pay for the cost of the infrastructure within the development. Now, when you go outside the development to meet the needs, it's a cost share because they need to provide you the cost for the infrastructure required to meet their needs. You have a responsibility to pay for any oversizing for future development. So I heard Mr. Benford talk about for future. Well, they're not required to pay for anything, the needs for the future. But by goodness, they are required to pay for their immediate needs. And you're not required to refund them any of that. Okay? Taxes are great, but let's talk about that for a second.
Can you try to wrap up in 1 minute?
Yes, sir. I'm going to tell you real quick. Total projected revenues, $28 million. That's right out of their financial documents. The total increased cost to the general fund, $29 million. That's a $1.7 million deficit over the time. It's in their own paperwork. Okay? So, and then when you go back to that, that's a net income to the general fund over the term of this, $868,000. That's it. You're going to sell out the city for 38 years to get $860,000, $20,000 a year. Come on. Okay? You turn around and say net benefit, impact fees, but then there's another page that says you got to pay them right back to them. So yeah, you get all this money, but you're going to give it right back to them. A period of assessment on the property owners. Also, there's the other part in here about a tiers, a county participating. I spoke to the commissioner, and I'm not going to put words in his mouth except for, I said, are you guys willing to pony up? We haven't been asked. Why not? Why aren't they asked to give some of their taxes up? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. The next person, the first person who signed up to speak for it, Mr. Terry Beck.
Really? I gotta follow that.
All right, first of all, I want to tell everybody that I appreciate all the work you put into this. Mr. Collins, the attorney, city council, staff, everybody. You've done a lot of work, and you've done it professionally. I have a funny feeling that the build-out is going to be a lot sooner than what they put on the screens at the town halls. And I'm only basing this on good developments that are happening all around the county. Good developments. I'm not talking about bad ones that go bad. I'm talking about good ones like Petranco Ranch, for instance, built out in a third of the time. Good development, good revenue coming into the county. We're going to provide more jobs for people. 75 acres of retail development. And you all are worried about infrastructure. And we spent the last 5-6 years pouring $20 million into a sewer plant and an east side lift station that does not work. We don't know how to put in infrastructure. I'd rather roll the dice, let Mr. Collins pay for it. I think it'll work, and reimburse him the money for it. At least the end result is it's going to work when we need it. Y'all are going into executive session tonight on the east side lift station. I'm sure it's going to cost us some more money, isn't it? More financial burden on me and my family. These people have laid out the groundwork. There is very reasonable safeguards within this development. Very reasonable. This is a good thing for our city. And I will never argue over an act of God and flooding. And if you want to try to do that, why don't you go drive to East Texas and talk to them people? You think they thought they were going to get flooded? They had no clue it was going to take place. Flooding is an act of God. These people are not going to pour their remains on somebody else.
1 minute, please.
I think you need to take a serious look at yourself tonight. You need to approve this development, and I agree with her. We need to use this as a model for all future developments that come into our city. And I can tell you one thing. This is a guarantee. Clay Benford is going to take good care of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beck. Okay. The next person who signed up to speak against it is Mr. Bob Lee.
We've got lots of time left, actually.
You got 4 minutes.
Bob Lee, 1314 Gentiles. I've heard some very interesting comments from council tonight, and it's very obvious to me that most of you are not nearly as familiar with this agreement as Mr. Dyer is. And I have some problems with that. And one of my main suggestions, and you've heard me make it before, is that y'all need to get educated yourselves about development agreements, how they're put together, talk to other cities, get some education. So when you look at a development agreement, you yourself, as a councilman here, can look at that and say, this makes good sense, this doesn't make good sense, you can look yourself in the mirror and the rest of us and explain exactly why this is good or bad for Castroville, and you'll have a better ability to negotiate because you will have learned about all these kind of things and the PIDs and the TERS and all the rest of that kind of stuff in order to yourself, not a doctor, not an engineer, yourself to say this is good for us or bad for us because you'll have a background in it, you'll have some education in it. Mitch Collins didn't come to town to build anything shoddy. To think that he would build something shoddy if we didn't have an agreement is baloney. He won't. He's got his family name. He's going to do a good job. He's done a good job. Okay, that's just crazy to think that we need to do this. And I heard all this talk, and I'm a specialist in what words mean, okay, what they say and what they don't say, because I used to write technical documentations for test. And I heard the burden is not on the city of Castroville citizens. It isn't to pay back the debt as far as the money, but the whole point of this is all the general fund revenue that we need to do streets and police and libraries and all the rest of that kind of stuff. If the development goes just fine, they keep 80 and 70% of the general fund revenue, which we must have in order to pay back the loan for internal infrastructure. So don't tell me that I am not paying and the rest of us are not paying to support that development, because that is exactly what we're doing, and that's exactly what was in the documents that have been presented. We are covering the majority of their general fund expenses. That is flat wrong, okay? This guy right here got up here and said, sewer plant, lift station, we shouldn't be paying those costs that that other person should pay. Well, that same thing applies to this. We do not need to be paying general fund expenses for that development. They need to pay their own way. I don't like 60, 40, 70, 30. I like 100% taxes coming to us, 0 to them, okay? Pay for the external infrastructure. If they want to come into the city limits, great. If they don't, okay. You know, to me, this just does not make financial sense. So we are hurting in the general fund already. We have to get money out of the electric and the sewer and everything else in order to fund it. And you're going to take on another 900 and something homes, essentially at about that same level? That doesn't make sense, folks. I asked for references for this kind of agreement in other towns in Texas to see how it went. I got no response. I've heard this is a brand new way of doing business. I'm not in the do business the brand new way in Castroville, okay? I would like to see some references on how this worked somewhere else, what the pros, the cons, the gotchas, and all the rest of that are. Okay, I have 0 references to go by. When I go to Amazon, I get at least 4 stars before I buy it. And you know, I buy Toyotas because they last and they're reliable and they're good. So far, what I've seen presented so far is absolutely not in our favor. I think he'll do a good job. I think he'll do a great job. But let's make the requirements reasonable, okay, and get the revenue we have to run the general fund in the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. Okay, the next speaker, Larry Sitter.
Either for or against. I'm not for either one.
You don't have a check mark.
I'm not for either one. Okay. I'm going to sit here and tell you my experience with the TERS. When I became commissioner, that was in 2011, January the 1st, the commissioner then came to me and says, we got a potential problem up on Petranco Road. We have a development called the Lone Star Ranches. It's 350 acres, 175 trailer homes, 175 water wells, and 175 septic tanks. I didn't hear nothing for about 2 years. I got a phone call. Man walked in my office. Everybody hated him. He flapped these plans down my thing. It had Lone Star Ranches. I says, is there anything we can do here besides this? He says, what do you want? I said, I want a gated community. We're right dead center in the middle of a drought. I said, I want a wastewater treatment plant that covers 475 houses for $1 million instead of sticking $22 million up on that hill. Who was on board here when they did that?
None of us.
Who was on there? None of y'all. No. I've been through 5 mayors. I've been through 4 administrators. I've been through 3 complete councils, and I'm still standing here. And I'm still doing TERS. I'm still doing PIDs. And the county is very well off. Why don't we participate? We're in 3 PIDs right now, and we're in 3 TERS, and fixing to do 2 or 3 more. This subdivision alone here on Petranco Lone Star Ranches would have brought in about $125 million. Today, it's got 475 lots It was supposed to be a 15-year build-out. It built out in 6 years and 8 months, Mr. Collins, at $449,000 per house on average, and they're going up. What they're putting in, I guarantee you, 40 homes is not even touching the bucket. He might do 40 the first year, next year he's going to do 100. Nobody's going to come in and buy that $250,000 house after their neighbor's done got one or two of them. They're going to want that 300, 325. I put it at 300,000, averaged out through the rest of the lifetime of that thing, and that's only going to go up. Instead of your 30-year build-out, you're going to build out in 15. What happens when you build out in 15? That money's going to income and get that thing paid off, and y'all get 100% of that money. Did anybody else tell y'all that? Once this thing's paid off, y'all get 100% of that money. Petranco Ranch is fixing to get that thing on, had a 24-year planned amortization. It's going to be paid off in 15. The county right now is 70-30. A $450,000 house at 30% is bringing more than they are across the street at Redbird Ranch on what they were selling houses for back there at $130,000 for it. So our 30% covers everything over there. On top of that, they give us $1.5 million to put up a brand new ESD, which is well on the way of being put in right down the road within 2 miles. This project they're doing here, they want to put in a soccer field for $1.5 million, a baseball field. I don't know what they're going to put in. They're going to extend the road out, try to get that extended out. Somebody's got to work on that sewer treatment plant, even on the mayor's Facebook. A quarter use is all they can handle right now? A quarter is all they can handle for $24 million? Mr. Breyer, yourself, you told me that sewer treatment plant cost us $5,000 a person. Isn't that what you told me?
Pretty close.
$5,000 a person for $24 million. Y'all got a $24 million project up here that ain't going to cost you 1 red cent out of your pocket. But you're okay paying $5,000 out of your pocket to pay for a sewer treatment plant that don't work. Believe me, these TERS and PIDs work. This is not a PID. This is the 380, which is the same thing as the TERS. Municipalities call them 380s, counties call them 381s. But anyhow, my heart and soul is into this county. I came into this thing to do one thing, get the subdivision straightened out. And I guarantee you, Mr. Dyer, we have not had one fail, not even close. And all I can see is good headlights coming down the road. We got more coming. We got better stuff coming in the county. It's fixing to explode from here up to the lake. I got developers and lawyers in my office weekly. Last week, 4 of them, 7 of them in 4 days. And all I can tell you, if y'all do something here, there won't be another Will Collins coming up behind him. I guarantee you that. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sitter. The next person to speak is Mr. Brian Griffin.
I'll surrender my time.
Okay. The last person who signed up to speak is Eric Cherry, speaking against.
Good evening, everybody. I got a question that nobody has really answered yet, and I would like to ask you guys if you know. How much does Highway 90 Partners plan to make on this development? Anybody? Hand?
I'll give you my opinion.
Not opinion.
As they can.
I know, not an opinion. Dollar value. How much do they plan to make? Because whenever you do a development, you're a businessman.
I know that.
You're a businessman, right?
Right.
Okay, so when you're going to do a project, you're going to say, I'm going to make $10 million. My costs are going to be $3 million. My gross revenue is going to be $10 million, right? My expenses are going to be $3 million. I'm going to make $7 million. That's my projected bottom line net profit, correct? So in this development, has anybody said what the developer is going to make or projected? He knows. They know already because they can't run the numbers if you don't know how much you're going to make, right? You can't have all expenses and no expected revenue, correct? You're a businessman? You should know that.
I think we should comment. They provided us both sides of the equation.
They provided us with
very detailed
with the revenue, but their total net revenue, no expenses, not revenue. Okay, just a thought. You need to think about that when you're in the city because you're going to look and see about how much money is he planning on making and how much money are we giving up for him to make that money. Okay, just a question. Utility rates. Okay, one of the fuzzy math that I'm still trying to get my arms around, when Mr. Binford was giving his extrapolation, was he said that when he looked at all the different utility funds, that wastewater was losing $400,000 a year, and that we should zero that out. Exact words, verbatim, that we need to zero that out to continue your extrapolation. And you had made that recommendation to council.
Right.
Okay. If we can zero out $400,000 a year in wastewater expense, why don't we just zero out all our debt? It'd be the easy way. I just don't know how you just do a accounting adjustment.
Get a tiered rate structure.
Okay, I'm just asking.
That's the
Okay,
answer.
okay. When utility rates, one of the other questions I asked was if our cost of providing clean water and sewer goes up geometrically because we're adding all these extra connections, correct? The answer was the city council has the option to raise utility rates, correct? Verbatim? Okay. Well, if you raise utility rates, can we just raise utility rates inside the development?
Yes, tiered rate structure.
Okay, so we can do that even though they're in the city and they're on our utility system, and we can charge them more money for being in the city. Okay, great. If we can do that, I think that's awesome. I don't know how you do that, but that's pretty good. Inside and outside the development expenses, as other people have said, outside the development, that's our bill. Right now, our general fund expenses, we haven't covered for a long time without transfers from our utility fund. Okay, my recommendation to council is to figure out where the balance point is when we can pay our general fund expenses without transfers from the utility fund, okay, from ad valorem and sales tax, okay? At that point, figure out how we can adjust the expenses for inside and outside the development. Just a different perspective. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, there's no other people that signed up. However, I'll open the floor. If there's anyone who wishes to speak for or against, you're welcome to come up and do it.
I want to answer Eric's question about the general fund. When are we ever going to get to a point where we're not going to rely on the utility? We're never going to do that in the city of Castroville because we don't have enough commercial revenue coming in. That's where it comes from. Businesses are closing down, they're moving out of town. There's a filling station on my side of town, gone. The only grocery store we had, gone. Why are they going out of business? Because there's not enough folks walking in there and spending money in their enterprise. It's that simple, folks. Now, let me tell you another benefit about developments like this. It would help the city of Castroville get closer to becoming a home rule city. That scares some people. It doesn't scare me because it gives us a lot of negotiating power when we're dealing with the big boys to the east, which we do not currently have. And I'm all for good development. I'm all for home rule. Let's do it right. And if we, the city of Castroville, do our part right in this development agreement, like Mr. Collins is going to do on his part, this thing will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beck. Okay.
I got one more minute?
He likes one too.
We have...
One more minute. One more answer to the question that Eric asked, did he leave or? But anyhow, when I have discussions with developers, and they're bringing to the table to me what I'm looking for, I said, I want you to make money. Because I want to keep you here. I told two of them that this last week, up toward the lake. I want you to make money. What is it my business to know how much money you make? How much you get on Sacramento? How much money profit you make? Is it anybody's business? You know, that is one of the ludicrous questions I could ever heard in my life. How much money are you going to make? They're going to put up $24 million, not no guarantee you're going to get paid back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sitter. I'll give you 1 minute, and this will be the last.
Okay.
I'll give you 1 minute after him, and you'll be the last speaker.
I just want to reiterate that I'm not against the development, I'm just against the way it's structured. There's other ways to do it. Commercial property, for example, you can give a tax abatement on that property, but keep the sales tax, the utilities, keep those fees, because the developer, the old school thinking in this city, they did it for years. Country Village, if you don't have a developer willing to put up the cost for this stuff, then they're not worth coming here. But I'm not criticizing them. I'm sure they'll do a great job. But I also just don't think you should be selling out the city for that long a term.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lee, you get the final minute.
Yeah, still who I was a while ago. ETJ map. And I had called this gentleman right there to ask him about that. About 20 years ago, give or take, we signed ETJ agreements, I believe, with a whole host of people to the east and to the north. That property that he has happens to be on that ETJ agreement map. What does that mean? Okay, there's some documentation around here that says what happens with encroachment from San Antonio and Bexar County and so forth. I think we need to know what those ETJ agreements say and what relationship and agreements the city had with those property owners. I think that's a key. Also, this particular property is on the slope, goes down toward Flat Creek. We all know about underground issues with water and clays and everything else here. Yet we're taking on all the maintenance agreements, and I doubt those streets last 30 years or even 15 before they're going to need some work. Even Walmart had to have a section of their street replaced coming off Highway 90 in less than 3 years.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Get smart, stay smart, make good decisions for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That brings us to the end of item number 12C. And we'll close that out at 7:51. And thank you all for your comments. We'll move on to item number 13, which is deliberation and action on an ordinance establishing an economic development program and pursuant to such a program approving a development agreement for Highway 90 Castroville Partners Limited related to the development of Alsatian Oaks development, and ordering other matters related to the program and development agreement approved thereunder. I'll open up the discussion to the City Council about if and what action you feel we should do tonight, or if we shouldn't do any action. I'll start with you, Sheena.
Like I said, I love the commercial side of it. If everything pans out like the testimonies have been given, then I'm for it, but I just want to make sure our people don't pay a price unnecessarily. So,
Paul?
I'm for the project. I want to see it happen. I have reservations, but I know there is no such thing as a perfect plan. I'm a fence guy at this moment.
Okay. Jesse?
Well, I'm still concerned about the money that we could have recuperated. I'm highly convinced that the construction is going to be of the highest quality. I've talked to some people where Mr. Collins come from, and his reputation comes about as high as it got. So I have no doubt he's going to build a quality development. I still wish we had made a better deal on the split up of the allocation. Here again, Larry, we both agreed there is no perfect deal. We said that. At the same time, we talked about the other. I'm going to be in favor of this development hoping it goes forward with the, in the way that it's been presented.
Thank you. Todd?
I think it's a good deal for the city. I think you can shoot holes in any plan that you have with anybody, but I think this is, I think we deliberated enough with this deal. And I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we, what would I say here?
We have to approve, the few things we have to do is approve the ordinance.
Or establish an ordinance, right?
Well, we have an ordinance that's been written that we have to approve. The second thing we have to do is approve the development agreement.
If you approve the ordinance, you will approve the agreement.
Okay.
And if you start with, with the deliberation and action on, if you start with move to adopt an ordinance, just read the rest of that.
I move to adopt an ordinance establishing an economic development program and pursuant to such program approving a development agreement with Highway 90 Castroville Partners LTD related to the development of Alsatian Oaks development and ordering other matters related to the program and development agreement approved thereunder.
Have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second, and further discussion, because I didn't get to discuss before he made his motion. So is there any further discussion from anyone else? I'd just like to make my comment. I think we're at a crossroads here. I think if we in the city choose to do nothing, we lose our ability to affect what happens to the east of us. If we take a bold step and we do what looks like to me to be a real sound agreement, I believe that we have a chance to really improve the financial situation and the living situation in our city. And I, for one, am very much in favor of the agreement. Any other discussion?
I have said before that we've been asked to participate in this, and if we choose not to, we can sit back and watch what happens. And I'm afraid that that is a very real possibility.
Any further discussion? As the Mayor Pro Tem, can I ask for a roll call vote?
Yes, sir.
I ask for a roll call vote. We'll start with Sheena.
Yes.
Paul.
Aye.
Aye. Jesse.
Aye.
Todd.
Aye.
And I vote aye. We have voted 5-0. The ordinance is passed. Okay. Moving on to item number 14, executive session. Pursuant to Texas Local Government Code 551.071 entitled Consultation with Attorney, City Council shall convene an executive session to consult with the city attorney regarding pending or contemplated legislation or a settlement offer or a matter in which the city attorney, under the state bar's rules of conduct, is required to disclose confidentiality to City Council as follows. Item A, outstanding issues with the contract, with the construction contract of Ram2 General Contractor, Incorporated, related to the East Side Sanitary Sewer Regional Lift Station Project. Item B, the failure of the occupant of the home at 2211 Geneva Street to complete the work necessary to obtain a permanent certificate of occupancy for the dwelling. Item C, the apparent operation of a church in a single-family residential structure located at 108 Tumbleweed Drive in violation of the city's zoning regulations and building code. The second item on the agenda for the executive session is pursuant to Texas Local Government Code Section 551.074, the City Council shall convene in executive session to deliberate the appointment, employment, and duties of the police chief. We will adjourn the public meeting at 7:58 p.m. and we will go into the conference room in executive session. Thank you very much.